Hey YouTube, this is Brian's Garage with another mechanical repair. I got a 2010 Hyundai Tucson, and I made a video about replacing the strut, so I figured I'd make a video a little bit more on the brakes. Um, what you're going to want to do first, jack the vehicle up. Always use a jack stand by a reputable jack stand dealer. You're going to take the wheel off. That has 5 21 millimeter lug nuts, and you're going to want to remove this guy first. This is actually two 12 millimeter bolts, so you can take this off. You're going to pry it out of there. I have this fancy little tool. It's a Matco brake caliper tool, and this guy, you're going to stick him in there and it'll press that back in. Before doing that though, you're going to want to remove your cover off your brake reservoir. A lot of what I noticed is a lot of these quick lube places, when you go in, they'll check all your fluids and top them off. Well, if your brakes are wearing, that piston's going to keep coming out further and further, and they're just adding fluid in there. So when you press this back in, you want to make sure that covers off, and you might want to put a drain pan underneath there to catch any of the fluid, because there might be more fluid than was originally in the system. So I press this back. This is nice. This is another Matco tool, just for hanging brake calipers and stuff. You don't want this hanging down, pulling on your brake line there. So don't need to put a hole in one of those. Then you take off this caliper bracket here. This has two 17 millimeter bolts that'll come out of there. You can take your old brake pads out. This kit is from O'Reilly's. I think it's Brake Best. This one is the higher grade brake pads. It came with the hardware, which was nice. What you're going to want to do though is, when you go to replace where this slide sits on there, you want to clean all these surfaces and this groove out really nice, so these can sit back down, so your brake pad can slide back in there. And your brake pads, you don't want to be stuck solid in there, because what happens is when you hit your brakes and it compresses your pads against your rotor, when it lets off, if those are sticking in there, you'll get some resistance, rubbing, affects your fuel mileage or gets these hot. So you want to make sure that these slide nice on these. Now another thing too is these guys here. You want to make sure that these still slide and move nice, because as your brake caliper squeezes here and lets off, it still needs to be able to move a little bit to let your brake pads come off a little bit. You don't want these stuck. And I've actually seen where these will stick when you press the brake. Well, then it'll start wearing one pad a lot worse than the other side. The other side could look fine, but the other one would be worn down. So always clean these surfaces really good. Make sure your pads aren't super tight or stuck in there. And then I put the bracket back on first. Put these on, put the brake pads in there, check them. And then you just put this guy back on, and it sits right in there. Reinstall your bolts. Now another thing too is, once you get all this together and you reinstall the wheel, torque it, you'll want to get in there and push your brake back out to get that fluid back into that piston, because if not, you might crap your pants when you put it into gear and go to hit your brakes and they go to the floor that first time. So just a couple little tricks. I mean, brakes are really important part of a vehicle. Oh, I forgot to mention too, this one actually has the two Phillips heads there, and that helps hold your rotor to your hub. This I got pretty lucky. I just did this number. It's actually a snap-on screwdriver. You can stick a wrench on it, and those actually came out pretty easy, you know, just twist them out. Sometimes they're actually stuck to where you'll need to take bit impact. It'll sit in there and then you'll hit it with a hammer, and as you hit it, it'll turn and knock the rust loose. So it was nice I didn't have to use that. So yeah, that's how you replace the brakes on a Hyundai Tucson. Thanks for watching, YouTube. Like and subscribe.